Did you know that studies show a breakup activates the same parts of your brain as physical pain, and that almost 40% of people experience symptoms close to clinical depression in the first weeks after it happens? That's why how to move on after a breakup during a tough time feels less like an emotional setback and more like surviving an earthquake inside your own mind. And here's the shocking part. Neuroscientists have discovered that heartbreak lights up the brain's reward system the same way cocaine addiction does. That's why you crave their presence, why you can't stop replaying memories, why silence feels unbearable. It's not weakness, it's biology. But here's the truth. What feels like the end can actually become the most powerful beginning of your life. Across history, thinkers like Marcus Aurelius, Jung, and even modern neuroscientists all reveal the same thing. Pain is real, but so is growth. And in this video, I'm going to show you not just one way, but many proven paths to move forward, rewire your mind, and rebuild your strength. If what I'm about to share resonates with you, even a little, give me a sign. Hit the like button, share this video, write "thank you" in the comments, or subscribe for more. Sigmund Freud once said that we never are so defenseless against suffering as when we love. Modern neuroscience has proven him right. Brain imaging studies from Columbia University show that when people go through a breakup, the same areas of the brain that activate during physical pain light up with almost identical intensity. That's why heartbreak doesn't just feel emotional. It feels like an injury, like you've been hit in the chest. Researchers found that people describing heartbreak often use words like crushed or stabbed, and these aren't metaphors pulled out of thin air. They are grounded in real biology. Pain is not only in your head, it is in your body. Carl Jung believed that heartbreak shakes the very foundation of the psyche because it attacks our sense of identity. You don't just lose a person, you lose the reflection of yourself that existed within that relationship. And this is where the torment begins. Who are you now without that mirror? Jung argued that every breakup forces us into what he called the shadow confrontation, where we face the parts of ourselves we ignored while immersed in the relationship. It's why even years later, certain memories can pull us back into a storm of emotions. Marcus Aurelius, centuries before psychology even existed, wrote in his Meditations that if you are distressed by anything external, the pain is not due to the thing itself, but to your estimate of it. He meant that the breakup doesn't just wound you because of what happened, but because of the meaning you gave to the person, to the love, to the future you imagined. When that meaning collapses, it's like watching an entire life burn down. And yet Aurelius also believed that this collapse is a doorway, an invitation to rebuild not only your expectations, but your strength. Studies reveal how intense this collapse really is. According to research from the University of Michigan, about 40% of people going through a severe breakup show symptoms almost identical to clinical depression. Their levels of cortisol, the stress hormone, skyrocket. Sleep cycles collapse. Immune systems weaken. Breakups aren't just emotional drama. They are biological earthquakes. Your body believes it is in danger, as if survival itself were threatened. This explains why you wake up at 3 a.m. with your heart racing, why food has no taste, why silence feels unbearable. It isn't weakness. It's the ancient wiring of your nervous system reacting to loss as though you've been abandoned by your tribe. A death sentence in prehistoric times. Seneca, the Roman Stoic, wrote that we suffer more in imagination than in reality. That truth is merciless during heartbreak. Your mind replays every detail, every possibility of what you could have done differently. Neuroscience calls this rumination, and it's deadly for recovery. In fact, research shows that people who ruminate for weeks after a breakup are twice as likely to develop long-term depression. Yet the paradox is that your brain is wired to replay because repetition is its way of learning from trauma. This creates the vicious cycle. The very process designed to protect you is what chains you to pain. But here lies an opening. Harvard psychologist Daniel Gilbert, author of Stumbling on Happiness, discovered that human beings consistently underestimate their own resilience. He demonstrated through longitudinal studies that within 1 year after a major heartbreak or loss, most people report levels of happiness close to where they were before the event. In other words, your mind convinces you that this pain will last forever. But statistics prove otherwise. 90% of individuals heal far faster than they predict. The problem is that during the storm you cannot believe this truth. You need to be reminded, sometimes relentlessly, that time is not just passing, it is reconstructing you. The weight of heartbreak feels unbearable because it hijacks both your biology and your psychology. You feel like you've lost not just someone you loved, but yourself, your future and your safety. And yet, thinkers from Seneca to Freud, from Marcus Aurelius to modern neuroscientists, all converge on the same point. This suffering, as crushing as it is survivable. More than that, it can be transformative. The brain heals. The self rebuilds. But in this first stage, it's natural to feel like survival itself is on the line. You are not broken for feeling broken. You are simply human, caught in one of the most universal storms of existence. Marcus Aurelius once wrote, "When you arise in the morning, think of what a precious privilege it is to be alive." It's a powerful reminder, but when your heart has just been shattered, those words can feel distant, almost impossible to apply. Yet it is precisely in moments of rupture that philosophy becomes medicine. Ancient thinkers and modern psychologists alike recognize that love and loss are not side stories of human life. They are its central dramas. And the way we navigate them determines not only our resilience, but the shape of our character. Seneca, the Stoic philosopher who lost his own son, wrote that grief is natural, but clinging to it beyond measure enslaves us. He compared emotional suffering to a fire. It will burn intensely, but if we keep feeding it with endless wood, our thoughts, our rehearsed memories, our what-ifs, the flames will consume us entirely. This is not advice to suppress grief, but to respect its cycle. Seneca believed pain is not an enemy but a signal, one that warns us of our attachment and demands we learn how to live without what has been taken. Centuries later, Carl Jung described heartbreak not as a mere wound, but as an initiation into deeper knowledge of oneself. He argued that love projects parts of our psyche onto another person, and when that bond breaks, we are confronted with our own shadows, our insecurities, our unmet needs, our illusions about who we are. Jung said that the meeting with oneself is at first the meeting with one's own shadow, and this is why heartbreak often feels unbearable. You are suddenly exposed to the parts of yourself you had hidden behind the other person's presence. Far from being just tragedy, Jung believed this is an opportunity for transformation, a forced confrontation with your real self. Sigmund Freud, the father of psychoanalysis, took an even sharper angle. In his essay, Mourning and Melancholia, he distinguished between healthy grief and pathological despair. Grief, he said, is painful but necessary. It gradually detaches our emotional energy from the lost person and frees it to be invested elsewhere. But melancholia is different. It's when the grief turns inward, when instead of mourning the other, you attack yourself with guilt, self-blame, or the belief that you are unworthy of love. Freud observed that people in melancholia often repeat phrases like, "I'm worthless," or "I'll never be loved again." And these thoughts dig trenches in the mind that can trap you for years. Recognizing this pattern is the first step toward breaking free. Modern psychology echoes these truths with numbers that are hard to ignore. According to the American Psychological Association, almost 85% of people report experiencing at least one major romantic breakup by the age of 30. And yet, research by the Journal of Positive Psychology found that 71% of those people also reported significant personal growth within 2 years of the breakup. They developed greater self-knowledge, new goals, even a deeper appreciation for life. This phenomenon is called post-traumatic growth. It suggests that while heartbreak may feel like an ending, statistically, it often becomes a foundation for reinvention. Even Viktor Frankl, the Holocaust survivor and author of Man's Search for Meaning, argued that suffering without meaning crushes us, but suffering with meaning transforms us. He wrote that, in some ways, suffering ceases to be suffering at the moment it finds a meaning. For heartbreak, that meaning might be hidden at first. It might be the discovery of your own strength, or the realization of illusions you need to shed, or even the sharpening of your empathy toward others. But Frankl's point is crucial. Pain can be endured, even transcended, if it is integrated into a larger narrative of growth. When you hear the words of these thinkers, Aurelius, Seneca, Jung, Freud, Frankl, you start to realize that heartbreak has always been part of the human condition. The way you feel now is not weakness, it is an echo of experiences lived by billions before you. And what these voices whisper across time is that your suffering has layers of meaning. You are not merely losing a partner, you are undergoing a transformation of the self. The very weight that crushes you today is the same weight that will one day carve strength into your character. When neuroscientists at Rutgers University placed people recently heartbroken inside an fMRI machine, they found something astonishing. The brain of someone who has just lost love doesn't simply look sad, it looks addicted. The same neural circuits that light up in cocaine or alcohol addiction blaze when you see a photo of your ex. Dopamine, the chemical of desire and reward, continues to surge even after the breakup, tricking your mind into craving what is gone. That is why you find yourself checking their social media at 2 a.m., why a single memory hits like withdrawal. The science is clear. Moving on is not just emotional, it is neurological detox. Helen Fisher, one of the leading anthropologists on love, called romantic attachment the most powerful addiction in the world. Her studies show that during heartbreak, the brain clings to the bond as if survival itself depends on it. This isn't irrational weakness. From an evolutionary perspective, pair bonding meant protection, resources, and survival. Losing that bond signaled danger. Your ancestors who panicked after rejection had a better chance of reuniting, which meant a better chance of living. So what you are experiencing now is ancient biology trying to keep you alive, even if it feels like it's destroying you. But biology is not destiny. Neuroplasticity, the brain's ability to rewire itself, is the escape route. Harvard researchers discovered that the same circuits of obsession can be redirected. New habits, new environments, new routines literally sculpt new neural pathways. The cliché, "time heals all wounds," is incomplete. Time alone does nothing. What heals is what you do with time, because every action, every thought, every distraction strengthens or weakens circuits in the brain. Think of your mind like a trail in the forest. The more you walk one path, the path of replaying, checking, obsessing, the deeper and more automatic it becomes. But when you force yourself to step onto another path, even if it feels awkward, you begin to carve a new road. Neuroscientist Andrew Huberman explains that the stress of heartbreak floods the system with cortisol, impairing memory and decision-making. This is why in the first weeks you feel foggy, impulsive, even irrational. But he also highlights that controlled stress, exercise, cold exposure, meditation, can help recalibrate the nervous system. Moving your body is not cliché advice, it is science. Physical activity increases brain-derived neurotrophic factor, or BDNF, a protein that repairs neurons damaged by stress. When you go for that run or push yourself through a workout, you aren't just distracting yourself, you are literally repairing a brain hijacked by grief. Then comes sleep. Neuroscientists from UC Berkeley found that lack of sleep amplifies emotional pain by up to 60%. The amygdala, the brain's fear and threat detector, becomes hyperactive when you don't rest. That is why everything feels worse at 3 a.m., why small reminders trigger enormous waves of pain. Protecting your sleep is not indulgence, it is survival. Every night of rest recalibrates emotional circuits, giving you more stability to face the next day. Freud believed the process of mourning was the psyche withdrawing energy from the lost attachment and reinvesting it elsewhere. Neuroscience now shows us the mechanics of that reinvestment. When you engage in new learning, whether it's music, language, or even new friendships, you activate the brain's reward system in fresh contexts. Over time, dopamine stops being tied exclusively to the memory of your ex. Instead, it begins to link to new possibilities. That's not moving on in an abstract sense. That is chemical reprogramming. And here's the paradox. The very obsession that chains you can also free you. The human brain is designed to adapt. Even the strongest addictions, when deprived of reinforcement, fade. Studies on heartbreak recovery reveal that while the first 8 weeks feel unbearable, Most people show significant emotional stabilization after 3 months. This doesn't mean you forget. It means the neural grip weakens, the circuits reorganize, and your brain begins to crave life again instead of replaying death. The science of letting go teaches one profound truth. Your suffering is not permanent wiring. It is temporary programming. The craving, the sleeplessness, the storm inside your chest, these are signals of a brain caught in withdrawal. But the same machinery that binds you is also your path out. Every small act, choosing not to text, choosing to sleep, choosing to move, reshapes the brain. Letting go isn't a one-time decision. It is a daily rewiring, a reconstruction of self at the most biological level. And the moment you realize that your brain is your ally, not your enemy, you begin to glimpse freedom on the other side of pain. Epictetus, the slave-turned-Stoic philosopher, once said, "We suffer not from the events in our lives, but from our judgment about them." These words strike harder after heartbreak than almost anywhere else, because what you lost was not just a person. You lost the story you told yourself about who you were with them and who you would become together. That collapse feels like death. And yet, the Stoics believed that pain was never just pain. It was raw material, clay to be shaped into strength. Modern psychology echoes this ancient insight. The American Psychological Association defines resilience not as avoiding suffering, but as the ability to adapt through it, and statistics are revealing. Research following people through divorce and severe breakups showed that about 75% eventually reported a stronger sense of self, new goals, and even more meaningful relationships. This is not survival in the passive sense. It is growth forged in fire. Marcus Aurelius, who buried children and endured betrayals, wrote in his Meditations, "The impediment to action advances action. What stands in the way becomes the way." The idea is radical. Your heartbreak is not a detour from life. It is life itself teaching you resilience. That sleepless night, that ache in your chest, that silence when you expect a voice but hear nothing, these are not punishments, they are training grounds. To endure them is to become unshakable. Carl Jung would add that heartbreak is an initiation into individuation, the process of becoming your truest self. He argued that without loss, many people remain fused with the identities they built in relationships, never discovering who they are alone. The rupture forces you to confront the emptiness, to fill it with your own essence. Jung wrote, "The privilege of a lifetime is to become who you truly are. Breakups strip away illusions and expose the work that must be done. Pain becomes a mirror, showing you the unfinished parts of your soul. And here is where neuroscience joins philosophy. Studies on post-traumatic growth show that adversity often triggers new neural connections, increasing creativity and problem-solving. Survivors of intense heartbreak frequently report discovering talents or passions they never explored before. It's not just poetic, it's biological. The brain, when pushed out of comfort, searches for new ways to find reward, to anchor itself. And those new pathways become foundations of resilience. Seneca once compared adversity to fire. Fire tests gold, suffering tests brave men. In the crucible of heartbreak, you are given a chance to burn away illusions and emerge purified. It doesn't mean the suffering is good. It means it can be used. Viktor Frankl, who endured Auschwitz, insisted that suffering without meaning destroys, but suffering with meaning transforms. He wrote, "When we are no longer able to change a situation, we are challenged to change ourselves." That is the essence of resilience, not denying the storm, but learning how to sail within it. Consider also what modern psychology calls emotional regulation. Studies show that people who reframe their heartbreak, not as the end of their life, but as a chapter in their story, recover faster and build healthier future relationships. This echoes Stoic practice, reframing events not as tragedies, but as opportunities to practice virtue. To be calm when abandoned, patient when ignored, forgiving when betrayed, that is resilience turned into character. And yet, resilience is not only philosophical, it is physical. Research reveals that people who establish routines after heartbreak, consistent sleep, exercise, journaling, rebuild stability far more effectively. The body grounds the mind. Marcus Aurelius reminded himself daily that he was flesh and bone, not a disembodied thought. To care for your body in grief is not weakness, it is aligning with nature, giving your nervous system the resources to heal. Transforming suffering into growth is never instant. It is a process of daily practice, of reframing, of refusing to let despair become identity. The Stoics did not claim to remove pain, they claimed to master its meaning. And modern science supports them. Resilience is built, not given. Your heartbreak right now feels like destruction, but within it lies the architecture of a new self, stronger, freer, wiser. The weight that bends you today is the very force that will sharpen your inner power. When Carl Jung spoke about healing, he insisted that you do not become enlightened by imagining figures of light, but by making the darkness conscious. In other words, recovery is not about pretending you are fine. It is about meeting the pain, understanding it, and then creating practices that slowly reshape your inner world. Modern psychology and neuroscience now prove what philosophers intuited centuries ago. Healing is less about waiting for time to pass, and more about the rituals and habits that direct how the brain rewires itself. Let's start with one of the most underrated tools, writing. James Pennebaker, a psychologist at the University of Texas, conducted decades of research on expressive writing. He found that people who wrote about their emotional pain for just 20 minutes a day for 4 days reported lower stress, better immune function, and faster emotional recovery. The act of writing forces the chaos of your thoughts into order, giving the brain a narrative it can process. Seneca himself believed that journaling was medicine for the soul. To pour pain onto paper is not weakness, it is structure. Another practice, ritualized movement. Neuroscientist Andrew Huberman emphasizes that the body is the fastest gateway to rebalancing the nervous system. When you exercise, you don't just blow off steam. You trigger the release of endorphins and endocannabinoids, chemicals that stabilize mood and reduce pain perception. Studies from Stanford show that just 30 minutes of moderate movement 5 days a week can reduce symptoms of depression by nearly 50%. This is not abstract encouragement, it is biology in action. The Stoics walked daily, often for hours, precisely because they knew the mind needed the body to reset. Sleep is another battlefield. As we saw earlier, heartbreak disrupts rest and poor sleep magnifies emotional pain. Creating sleep rituals, dim lights, no screens before bed, consistent hours, signals the brain to restore balance. Matthew Walker, author of Why We Sleep, demonstrated that deep sleep is when emotional memories are reshuffled and stripped of their sharpest sting. Protecting your sleep is protecting your emotional recovery. Marcus Aurelius, in his nightly reflections, practiced what modern scientists now confirm, reviewing the day, calming the mind, then surrendering to rest. Connection, too, is essential. Freud warned against the trap of melancholia, turning pain inward and isolating. Social neuroscience reveals that human contact literally calms the brain. Oxytocin, the bonding hormone, reduces stress responses and promotes healing. Talking with friends, joining groups, even volunteering, these are not distractions. They are antidotes to the evolutionary panic of abandonment. A study in the Journal of Social and Personal Relationships found that people who maintained active social connections after heartbreak recovered twice as fast emotionally. Meditation is another powerful rewiring tool. Harvard studies show that mindfulness practice reduces activity in the default mode network, the part of the brain responsible for rumination. Seneca and Epictetus didn't use the word meditation, but their daily exercises in self-reflection and detachment were identical in principle. Even 5 to 10 minutes of focusing on breath, observing thoughts without judgment, begins to weaken the obsessive circuits that chain you to memories. Finally, small rituals of meaning. Viktor Frankl argued that suffering only transforms when it is given meaning. Creating personal rituals, lighting a candle for closure, writing a letter you never send, planting something new, signals the brain that the chapter is ending and a new one is beginning. These symbolic acts, backed by psychology, help the psyche detach and re-anchor in the present. Healing after heartbreak is not passive, it is active, daily, intentional. Writing to shape your thoughts, moving to balance your chemistry, resting to reset your brain, connecting to soothe your nervous system, meditating to weaken obsession, and creating rituals to find meaning. These are not just coping strategies, they are rewiring strategies. They turn survival into transformation, and this is the truth both Stoics and scientists converge upon. Suffering is raw energy. If left unchecked, it burns you, but if channeled through ritual, habit, and practice, it rebuilds you. The brain adapts, the soul strengthens, and little by little, the impossible weight of heartbreak becomes the very material from which resilience is carved. Nietzsche once wrote, "What does not kill me makes me stronger." The phrase has been repeated so often it risks sounding hollow, but when you are standing in the ruins of a breakup, it takes on a new dimension. Because the truth is, heartbreak doesn't just test you, it remakes you. The question is not whether you will rebuild, but what kind of self will emerge from the ashes. Marcus Aurelius urged himself daily to begin again, no matter how often he was struck down by loss or betrayal. This was not naive optimism, it was a disciplined practice of seeing every ending as the raw material of a new beginning. In psychological terms, this is called post-traumatic growth. Studies in the Journal of Personality and Social Psychology reveal that more than 60% of people who endure major emotional trauma report within 2 years a stronger sense of purpose, deeper empathy, and greater resilience. Heartbreak, paradoxically, becomes one of the most powerful catalysts for reinvention. Carl Jung described this reinvention as individuation, the process of becoming a whole, authentic self. He argued that loss strips away false identities and forces you to confront the question, who are you when no one else defines you? Jung believed that out of this emptiness a deeper, truer identity can emerge, and neuroscience supports this. When you form new habits, pursue new goals, or learn new skills after a breakup, your brain literally rewires itself, creating new pathways of reward. You are not just moving on, you are becoming someone new at the most biological level. But rebuilding is not only about the self, it is also about the world you create around you. Viktor Frankl, who endured the horrors of concentration camps, insisted that life demands we find meaning even in suffering. He wrote, "When we are no longer able to change a situation, we are challenged to change ourselves." After heartbreak, meaning might be found in creativity, in service, in exploring passions that had been buried under the weight of the relationship. Many report that their greatest breakthroughs, the book they wrote, the business they started, the journey they took, came not despite heartbreak, but because of it. Modern psychology calls this narrative identity. The stories you tell yourself about your past shape the person you become in the future. If the story is, "I was abandoned and broken," your identity will shrink around pain. If the story is, "I survived, I learned, I grew," your identity will expand around strength. And this choice, though difficult, is always yours. Seneca reminded his students, "Every new beginning comes from some other beginning's end." He saw life not as a single path, but as a series of transformations. Rebuilding also requires patience. Neuroscientific studies reveal that it takes on average 66 days to form a new habit, and often several months to stabilize after a major loss. This means your healing is not an overnight revolution, but a gradual reconstruction. Yet every small step, the morning you wake without checking your phone for their message, the night you laugh again with friends, the day you start a project you had delayed, marks the laying of a new foundation. And here lies the ultimate paradox. Heartbreak feels like death, yet it is often the birthplace of life renewed. The self that emerges is not weaker, not shattered. It is sharper, deeper, and more resilient. History is full of examples. Nelson Mandela, after 27 years in prison, rebuilt not just himself, but an entire nation. Writers like Elizabeth Gilbert or philosophers like Kierkegaard found their most profound works through heartbreak and loss. Their pain became art, wisdom, and transformation. So the final step is not just to let go, it is to embrace the new self that is being born. The relationship you lost was a chapter, not the book. You are the author. And from this point on, every choice you make, every habit, every ritual, every reframing, is ink on the page of a new story. Heartbreak is not the end of you. It is the initiation into you. And as both ancient philosophers and modern science affirm, What feels today like collapse is, in truth, the architecture of a beginning.